Good morning. What a beautiful day. What a beautiful people. Sally says we might as well be in Minnesota. But this is gorgeous for me. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples. Whether you've been a member here for a long time or whether this is your first visit, you are warmly greeted, and we are happy to have you here. The Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples is a welcoming congregation, and our mission is to seek intellectual and spiritual growth and strive to create a larger community of peace, justice, and love. Each of us is encouraged to grow here spiritually and in fellowship with others by joining in worship, in celebration and educational opportunities, and reflection and discussion. We strive to do all this in the spirit of love and acceptance. I urge you to look at the Sunday news in your order of service. It tells about all the things that are coming up this coming week. And I will point your attention to especially today. Today, we have a concert this afternoon with Tropical Storm and some of our own people, and it's very exciting, and this is a fundraiser for our contributions to the Immokalee Housing and Family Services. So I urge you to come. We're not having an auction this year, but we're doing a number of events. So this is the first one, and I hope you'll come so that we can support that group of people out in Immokalee. They've been doing such great work. Also of note, this coming Wednesday evening, there's a Vesper service here in the sanctuary when the holidays hurt, a time for people who struggle sometimes during this festive season. And I think that's all I'm going to point out. Please know that there are aids for hearing if you need some help in that area, and large print hymnals should you have some trouble reading that fine print in our hymnal. I ask you now to turn off any cell phones or any other devices that might ring out during the service. And let us now center into our time of worship together. Welcome into this sanctuary of peace. Here may you find the stillness to calm a busy mind. Welcome into this sanctuary of hope. Here may you find the courage to live your faith. Welcome to this sanctuary of love. Here may you find open arms ready to embrace both joy and sorrow. Welcome to this sanctuary, home to all that we are and all that we wish to be. Let's join our voices in singing our opening hymn, number 223, Rock of Ages. Rise as you are willing or able. Please be seated. There are a few seats up front if anybody wants to come forward. Our chalice lighting words come from Albert Schweitzer. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. Let's join together in the chalice lighting response that you'll find in the order of service. O flame of our faith, open our hearts
and fill our bodies and souls with persistent strength.
Enliven our spirits and engage us deeply in this life of ours, this sacred, essential moment now. We have new microphones. Very exciting. Today's service is about Hanukkah, and it's sort of the rest of the story about Hanukkah. Hanukkah is a minor Jewish holiday that has sort of gained in visibility and prominence over the last number of decades, mostly since the late 1900s, in the 70s probably, in a response to the growing commercialism of Christmas. So we celebrate Hanukkah, but there are deeper lessons to be had than just the commercial aspects of the season. and the festivals. Interestingly enough, in the story that I will share with you later on during the sermon, the Greeks end up being sort of the bad guys. And what's really interesting is at about the same time as the Greeks and the Jews were struggling in Judea, in Egypt, in Alexandria, the Hellenized Greeks or the Hellenized Egyptians were excited about the possibility of learning about this faith and understanding it, and embarked on a new translation of the Torah, of the Hebrew Scriptures. That translation is called the Septuagint, and there is a legend that sprung up around that. It was said that Ptolemy asked 70 scribes to go into 70 different rooms and translate the Hebrew Scriptures all at the same time, individually. And the miracle was that each of those translations came out exactly the same. It was just a wonderful, incredible event. But the reality is that the curiosity of the world, of the Hellenized world, was still blossoming. There was a wonderful blossoming of interest and curiosity about the world in general. And so, in fact, the Greeks, the Greek ideas actually fostered this translation and may have indeed been more important in establishing Judaism as a world religion than, in fact, the Maccabees' success in Jerusalem in the middle part of the 2nd century CE. So just a little taste of a different part of the story that you won't hear later, but an interesting one nonetheless. Let us now, though, deepen ourselves into a time of sharing, times of joys and sorrows. This is a time when you can share something in your heart. It's good to see some new faces in the sanctuary this morning, people who are coming down and visiting us again for the first time this year. Good to see you here. If you have a joy or a sorrow that you'd like to share, I'll bring you the microphone. I hope you'll share what's in your heart briefly and tell us your name. So, joys and sorrows. That's great. Anyone else? Thank you for your sharing. We recognize that we all have joys and sorrows that we hold in our hearts. Sometimes we are able and ready to express them, and sometimes we're not. So today I'm going to light a candle of community to represent all those joys and all those sorrows that have remained unspoken. Let's remain seated and center ourselves even deeper as we sing together, Gathered Here, number 389. Richard will play this through once, and then we'll sing it just once before the meditation. Spirit of life, creative force, be in us now and always as we work to heal this world, the only world we will ever know. We live in gratitude for the earth that sustains us, and in humility, knowing that we are but a small part of that greater whole. Let us honor our differences and forgive each other's shortcomings, understanding that hope lies only in an ever-broadening sense of community. May we use our minds to always seek a deeper understanding and to learn the lessons that our history and our own experiences provide. May we find the courage to face our fears, the determination to weather difficult times, and the faith to know that peace and justice can prevail, even if the arc of justice spans many generations. Let us sit together in silence as we consider these things, and remember those who we will hold close in our hearts. The first reading this morning is from the Scroll of Antiochus. These were writings that were dated as early as the 2nd century CE, after the birth of Christ. This is the first written version of the miracle of the temple oil. After this, the sons of Israel went up to the temple and rebuilt its gates and purified the temple from the dead bodies and from the defilement. And they sought after pure olive oil to light the lamps therewith, but could not find any, except one bowl that was sealed with the signet ring of the high priest from the days of Samuel the prophet, and they knew that it was pure. There was in it enough oil to light the lamps therewith for one day. But the God of heaven, whose name dwells there, put therein his blessing, and they were able to light from it 8 days. Therefore the sons of Hashmoni made this covenant, took upon themselves a solemn vow, they and the sons of Israel, all of them, to publish amongst the sons of Israel to the end, that they might observe these 8 days of joy and honor as the days of the feasts written in the book of the law, even to light in them so as to make known to those who come after them that their God wrought for them salvation from heaven. And our second reading this morning is a responsive one. So I hope you'll look in your orders of service. This is adapted from Hanukkah by Lynn Unger. Come down from the hills, declare the fighting done. Come down. Try to remember a life gentled by daily acts of domestic faith.
How can you set the pot to boil, or make up the bed, or set the table in calm expectation, that when the sun sets, we will still be here?
Come down and settle. Unlearn the years of hiding. Declare your presence, your loyalties, the truths for which you do not expect to have to die.
It would take a miracle to carve such a solid life out of the shell of fear.
I say you are the stuff from which such miracles are made. At this point in the service, we will gratefully welcome your contributions to the ongoing mission of this congregation. The morning's offering will be gratefully given and received. Thank you. Thank you. On the surface, the story is remarkably simple. We have the good guys, the Maccabees, fighting for their way of life and religious freedom. And we have the bad guys, the tyrannical Greeks, the Greek overlords smothering the Jewish nation. We have an unexpected victory and a celebration of deliverance and rededication made even more wondrous by the miracle of the temple oil. Of course, history is never that simple. And the story of the Jewish revolt in the 2nd century BCE is no exception. It took place within the context of a world dominated by Greek ideas and culture that blossomed following the conquests of Alexander the Great a century and a half earlier. After Alexander's death and the breakup of his empire into 3 parts, Judea found itself under the control of the Seleucid kings, heirs of one of Alexander's gifted generals, who ruled a large expanse of territory to the north and west. The Greek Hellenistic culture that the Seleucids promoted acted as a powerful solvent for traditional Jewish practices and mores. As time went on, the priests and the Jewish aristocracy in Jerusalem drew closer to the Greeks, and those Hellenized Jews began to see the old traditions of Jewish separation and distinctiveness, characterized especially, but by no means exclusively, by the dietary laws, as being outdated and parochial. Had it been left to happen gradually, the almost irresistible force of Hellenization might well have taken over the Jewish people. But the Seleucid king Antiochus IV, overreacting to a minor political intrigue in 167 BCE, decided to push the agenda. His army stormed into Jerusalem and, according to 2nd Maccabees, massacred or sold into slavery 80,000 Jews. He defiled the great temple in Jerusalem, dedicating it to Zeus, and in a departure from the usual Greek and Seleucid practice of letting subjects maintain their own customs, decreed the prohibition of Mosaic law and forced, sometimes quite brutally, those who remained to follow the Greek pagan religion. The revolt that ensued came from outside the cities, where the simpler folk who had continued to maintain the old traditions were incensed by the defilement of the temple and the abrupt dismissal of their religion. The individual who emerged to lead the revolt was Mattathias the Hasmonean, a priest from the small town of Modin. For him, the conflict was not about religious freedom or individual conscience. The people who finally stood up to the Greeks were zealots, fundamentalists who saw this battle as a battle between a corrupt earthly power and the law of God, and they were willing to sacrifice their lives for their cause. Does this have a familiar ring to it? Mattathias, who died early in the revolt, left his sons to carry on the fight, and they became known as the Maccabees, or Hammers, for their successful guerrilla tactics. The revolt was ugly and brutal, often pitting Jew against Jew, but slowly the Maccabees were able to build a coalition of groups who began to believe that their traditional way of life was worth saving. 3 years into a 5-year war, and after much back and forth, the Maccabees were able to carve out some space and take back Jerusalem, aided a little bit by a new treaty with a new power in Rome. As the Seleucids retreated to the north, the Maccabees entered Jerusalem as heroes, and it's no wonder that they would have gone straight to the temple and rushed to restore and purify it, for the temple was no less than God's home on earth, the Holy of Holies, the place where God said he would meet his people. They were rushing to reconnect with their God, their ground of being. The story of that victory and the restoration and rededication of the temple in Jerusalem is told in 1st and 2nd Maccabees, books that are not part of the Jewish scriptural canon. And nowhere in the contemporary account is there a mention of the miracle of the oil. The festival of rededication that was established ran for 8 days to correspond to the 8 days of celebration that accompanied the dedication of the first temple in the days of Solomon. The miracle of that long-lasting oil doesn't actually show up in written form for at least another 200 years. What is documented, however, is the unfortunate rigidity of the Maccabean Hasmonean rule in Judea. As we have seen in our own times, the combination of fundamentalism and power can be stifling, and it was no different in this case. After solidifying their power, the Maccabeans exerted as much or more control than the Greeks before them. Under the Maccabees, the Torah became the obligatory law of the land, and non-Jews were forced to convert. Within the seeming triumph of traditional Judaism over outside forces, old factions began to reemerge over time, factions that fought the same old battles. How can we follow tradition and still function in this Hellenized world? Shouldn't there be a separation of power between the temple and the state? Over time, the Jewish liberators became tainted and solidified their power with sometimes brutal force. As their wealth and dominion increased, they became the tyrants and were themselves taken up in the continuing march of Hellenism. As Rabbi Irving Greenberg writes, following generations were embarrassed at the deviation and ambiguities of the actual historical record and of the movements through which it seemed God had saved the people and the faith. So they began to idealize the holiday. Almost 300 years later, the rabbis who were pulling together the Talmud, that rich commentary on the Hebrew scriptures, were well aware that the Maccabees' military victory had saved the nation, but the rabbis realized that getting stuck there would be self-destructive. In their own time, after the temple had been destroyed completely by the Romans in 70 CE, it was crucial for them to focus on the universal message of courage and hope, and to do so in a way that didn't lift up military resistance, which in hindsight they saw as dangerous and self-destructive. The rabbis understood the power of story, and so it is the miracle of the temple flame, the myth built upon the real history, that has survived and has helped sustain people of faith for over 2,000 years. There's a wonderful children's book that tells the story of Rabbi Hugo Grin and of the time he spent in a concentration camp as a young teenager in the bitter cold winter of 1944. Grin writes that one night his father led him and a few others to an out-of-the-way corner of the barracks and announced to them that it was Hanukkah. He relates that his father produced a curious-shaped bowl and began to light a wick immersed in his own precious ration of margarine. Before his father could recite the blessing, Hugo protested at the waste of food. His father looked at him, and then at the lamp, and finally said, "You and I have seen that it is possible to live up to 3 weeks without food. We once lived almost 3 days without water, but you cannot live properly for 3 minutes without hope." In a sermon celebrating Hanukkah, Rabbi Gregory Marks of Congregation Beth Or in Ambler, Pennsylvania, asks why we celebrate Hanukkah for 8 days. According to the miracle story, the Maccabees had enough oil for that first day, so the miracle really occurred over the following 7 days. So why? Why do we commemorate an 8-day miracle? And his colleague, Rabbi Avis Weiss, responds that needing oil for 8 days, but having found oil that could last for only one, most people would not have lit it in the first place. Why light when failure is certain? Why make the effort if the effort is doomed? The miracle of the first day is that the Maccabees found the inner strength, the inner courage to light the menorah in the first place. They did not give up, for they knew nothing was impossible, and in the end, they prevailed. No one is immune from the moments of darkness, but light can remove the darkness. Day does follow night. The message of Hanukkah that remains to us is to kindle the first light, to care, to be connected, to be concerned, and to lift others. In the end, the ancient rabbis said, a little bit of light goes a long way to drive away the darkness. This was the essence, the message of Hanukkah that my wife Ann and I tried to relate to our two boys as we honored the holiday as good UU parents. Last year, over Thanksgiving, I asked my youngest son, Nate, who some of you have met, what he remembered about our Hanukkah celebrations, and he surprised me by saying that it was his favorite part of the holiday season. He said that when we lit the menorah in the dining room window against the backdrop of the darkness outside, he felt the wonder and mystery of the season more than any other time, and that he'd been disappointed that we had stopped observing it during the busy high school years. Of course, his favorite part of Hanukkah was the annual reading, or should I say multiple readings, of a book called Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblins, which tells the tale of a traveling rabbi who saves a local synagogue by tricking a series of ever larger and more gruesome demons into lighting the menorah over the 8 nights of Hanukkah, proving yet again that light indeed overcomes darkness. As Unitarian Universalists, we have a long tradition of looking for the universal in every story. It's why our principles say that we draw from many sources in our search for truth and meaning. We believe that each religion has strengths that have stood the tests of time, gifts they offer through their stories, their myths, their traditions, that point the way to universal truths and help us understand our lives together on this planet. Even in the messy history of this celebration, there are lessons to learn and opportunities to see ourselves and others through a different lens. Are we the Maccabees, fighting for justice and a way of life? Or are we the Hellenizers, pumping our culture across the known world? Can we recognize in ourselves a fundamentalism that dehumanizes the other and cuts off the possibility of dialogue? Perhaps we can identify with the common folk who just want to live a good life without fear. Hanukkah is a holiday rooted in history rather than nature. It comes near the solstice, and so its emphasis on light feels natural at this time of year, consistent with the seasonal festivals of other traditions, but that is a coincidence and not the root of Hanukkah. Those roots of Hanukkah are both human and miraculous. They take us to a messy history, and even though that distant mirror reflects back an equally messy present, it helps us ask what separates us from ourselves and from each other, and from our ground of being. The story tells us that even in our messy lives, we can rededicate ourselves to being the best of who we are as individuals and as a community. It reminds us that there remains always opportunity for the erasing of defilement, for renewal, for reconnection to the life that we want to live, to the people we want to be. And that in and of itself is a miracle. As Rabbi Marx said, in an age of skepticism, sometimes it is we who must offer the example of faith. From some inner place, we must, at critical moments, find the courage to kindle light in the face of darkness. That's how the world is improved. That's how sanctuaries and synagogues and temples are built. That's how we overcome the problems of day-to-day living. That's how we get up in the morning. Someone kindles a light against all odds, and miraculously it survives and inspires others to rekindle their own flame. Let this be the lesson of Hanukkah. May we kindle our own light and inspire others by our courage. May it be so. Our final hymn is number 221, Light One Candle. Now this moves along, so be ready. Richard will play it through once for us, and then we'll jump in. Please rise as you're willing or able. I know you can sing this out. Light fires that can be seen for miles, that dance and spark and warm the frozen marrow. Set lamps in the window. Declare your presence, your loyalties, the truths for which you do not expect to have to die. It would take a miracle, you say, to carve such a solid life out of the shell of fear. I say, you are the stuff from which such miracles are made. Please be seated for the postlude. Thank you. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Help the suffering. Support the weak. Honor all beings. Light one candle.